Okay, Proverbs. We're going to start in Proverbs 24 today. And we've been looking at the word, usually in the King James it's translated as judgment. But it's the word mishpat, which is a word that means a just verdict, the right decision at the end of a court case, or it can be used to refer to the judgment, the right decision that God has decided about what is right. You know, the whole Old Testament law could be referred to as a just decision of God. That this thing is just, a declaration that a thing is just. So that's what this word is. It's if it's used on a human level, it's going to be the verdict at the end of a court case. But if it's used in more of an ultimate sense, it's going to be referring to God having declared a thing to be righteous or a thing to be just. So, with all that being said, we've got 4 verses today, and they're going to kind of remind us. We've been going through the Proverbs piece by piece, and we've seen actually several categories. And today, as we close this word justice, I want to sort of put them into categories, the things we've already seen, and you'll see them in connection with these 4 verses. So, first one is, I would put this under the category of the perversion of judgment, or perversion of justice. And just to give you, this is Proverbs 24, verse 23. Before I read that, I'm going to remind you of 2 we've read in the last few weeks. Proverbs 17:23, a wicked man taketh a gift out of the bosom to pervert the ways of judgment. In other words, he will receive a bribe and ignore what is just in court because he's bribed. And then chapter 18, verse 5, it is not good to accept the person of the wicked to overthrow the righteous in judgment. There's a perversion of justice where you accept somebody who you like better instead of what is right, instead of justice in court. And then the one that we have before us, Proverbs 24, verse 23, these things also belong to the wise. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. Now, continue with me in verse 24. He that saith unto the wicked, thou art righteous, him shall the people curse. Nations shall abhor him. But to them that rebuke him shall be delight, and a good blessing shall come upon them. This is a perfect capstone to that category of perverting justice here. And it's one of those rare, more than one verse proverbs. This is a 3-verse proverb. Let me read it again. He starts by saying, these things belong to the wise. These statements about justice are wise statements. The wise receive them. They belong to them. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. That is to say, I like that person better, and so I'm biased towards their cause instead of being fair and equal in court. He that saith unto the wicked, thou art righteous, him shall the people curse. If you call a wicked person a righteous person, you're going to be called a wicked person. You're going to be cursed by the people. Remember, Solomon is writing to his son. He's writing as a ruler and as a leader. He's saying, son, don't do that. If someone is unjust, say it. Call them unjust. Don't say that they are righteous, because then you'll get the curse. You're associated with them. Nations shall abhor him. But to them that rebuke him, in other words, to those who say, this person is unrighteous and I'm against it, and announce correct justice, shall be delight. You'll receive the delight of the people, and a good blessing shall come upon them. Well, isn't that true? I mean, just being the people in our nation. You know, I don't think any of us hold any political office. So, you know, we're just the people, right? Don't you identify with that? How you love a leader who's going to point at corrupt evil that's going on and say that's evil, and you associate even a leader who might have some good things about them. You all of a sudden think evil of them if they start saying about other evil people that they're okay, that they're good. I mean, you know, can you identify with that? I certainly can. What are some of your thoughts?
I think so much in the past, especially in the last several years, that is not the case. That half the people who say something is wicked cheer them on. That it's a great secret. Unfortunately, in practicality, we don't see this.
Yeah, it's true in America that there are teams, and I think that's probably a good way to say it. Like, we've developed this sort of team mentality in our country, where if you're on my team, anything you say is automatically good, and anything you do wrong, that didn't happen. It's all just a lie about that person. And then if you're on the other team, everything you say is bad, and if you say something that's good, it's just now I hate that thing that is good because you said it, right? So we have this, it's almost like sports teams kind of a thing. And then this verse still applies to us only in a different way. We're not the people who are supposed to be happy with our rulers denouncing evil. We're now the people who are accepting the persons of the wicked. we're the ones who are choosing to joy in that which is wicked because it's our team, and we have respect of persons rather than having correct justice. And this is why the wisdom of God and what is right and true is a universal thing that we all need to grasp, because if somebody we like does something wrong, we say, that is unjust. Even though I like you, I can't respect your person in the sense that this is still unjust. And if somebody we don't like does something right, we say, that is just. I still don't like you very much, but what you did was just, and we have to be impartial. Yeah.
Well, and likewise, one of the earlier verses you covered was, if you do evil, if the person does evil and you say they're good for doing that evil, you'll partake of that curse as well.
Yeah, so if they're doing evil and you are saying it's good, you're bringing curse upon yourself. You're joining with them in the sin by being part of covering it up. Justice is so important, and it seems to be. You're right, Todd. That there does seem to be like it's less important to a lot of people today, but just because it's just. We should, people say, well, we want to rehabilitate people who do horrible crimes. I think it'd be great for them to be rehabilitated, but they still have to have justice. And justice by itself is a moral good. Even if it doesn't benefit me, it's still good for justice. Micah, can you just real quick turn off that dehumidifier? And don't forget to turn it back on when we're done. It's hot down here. All right, anyone else? Okay, let's go to the next one. So we talked about perversions of justice. We also had, go with me if you would to Proverbs 28. We also had several verses that deal with, that over the last few weeks, that deal with how wicked people have a real difficult time with justice. Because even when a righteous person does a wrong thing, they tend to be like, oh man, that was wrong, right? I deserve justice. But a person whose heart is set on wickedness, they have a real problem with justice. And so we saw a couple examples of this. Proverbs 21 verse 7 said, the robbery of the wicked shall destroy them because they refuse to do judgment or justice. Proverbs 21:15, it is joy to the just to do judgment, but this destruction shall be to the workers of iniquity. Like the people who are doing right, they're like, yes, I did something that was just. Justice itself is an end goal. I like justice. I'm rejoicing in that. But the workers of iniquity, not so much. They don't like justice. And here we see another example of that. Proverbs 28 and verse 5. Evil men understand not judgment. There's that word again. Justice, judgment, a just judgment. But they that seek the Lord understand all things. I love the contrast here. The evil men, they don't understand it. You ever have somebody who's just really against God? Try to make an accusation about how evil God is because of all the laws of the Old Testament. Oh, God is an evil God because the God of the Bible is evil because all those laws in the Old Testament that have such harsh penalties for sexual immorality and such harsh penalties for this and for that. And why is that? Well, the reason is because they are sinners and they don't think it's just to be so harsh against sinners because they are sinners. We all are sinners, right? But that's why the wicked have a really hard time understanding God's justice. The fact that it's just is difficult for them to grasp, because their standard is what makes me happy, what makes me feel good, and God's laws don't make me feel good, And so they have a hard time grasping that this is justice, because it's a standard higher than themselves. But they that seek the Lord, and that word Lord is translated from the word Yahweh or Jehovah, however you want to pronounce it, doesn't matter. But they that seek Yahweh understand all things. And really, the word things, you could see that if you have a translation that italicizes the additional word, the words that are added. Really, it just says, they that seek the Lord understand all. And the King James translator said, well, all what? So they just said things, Other translations will say they understand completely, because the word all could be translated as completely. But either way, what you have is they that seek the Lord. So now my standard isn't me, what feels right to me. It's not wishy-washy. Justice isn't, that's just because you think it's just, and that's just because you think it's just. And it's not personal. It's not everyone gets their own justice. No, justice has a higher standard than what I feel is right and what I feel is wrong. Justice is based on God. And so those who seek themselves are not going to understand justice. But those who seek the Lord and set him as the standard are going to say, wow, whatever he says is justice. And so then they understand it quite easily. They understand all of his justice. They understand the Old Testament as they grapple with it, because God said it. I'm accepting it because I'm seeking the Lord, and the rest falls from my confidence that God is the standard for justice. If he says this is just, it must be just. If people will wrestle with things like people dying, God commanding that certain people be killed or die in the Old Testament. Oh, how could a loving God do that? Well, what are you talking about? He creates everybody, and everybody dies when God says they die. Okay? So God has the right to end somebody's life. In fact, he does end everyone's life, right? So if you're looking at God as a human and say, well, it's not just for him to end someone else's life. Okay, that would be true if he was a human, but he's not. He's God. And so when you seek the Lord and understand that he is the standard of what is just, then it all starts to make sense. What are some of your thoughts on that one? Yes, Lou?
I was just thinking on that particular thing. If God wasn't willing to allow people to die, why would he have, he sent Jesus. If he was willing to have his son die, then who are we to say, no, you can't take somebody's life?
Yeah, and he tells us too, he's like, listen, I don't have pleasure in the death of the wicked. It's not his joy that wicked people die and suffer judgment, but they will die and suffer judgment. That is part of the justice of God. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go to number 3. Man, you guys want to get out, don't you? Okay. Number 3, Proverbs 29. No, we're going to stay in Proverbs 29 for the next 2. This I put in the category of talking about a king pronouncing justice. So Proverbs 16 and 11 said, a divine sentence is in the lips of the king. His mouth transgresseth not in judgment. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his work. So Proverbs 16 gives us an example of Solomon saying this is what a king ought to do. He ought to have divine or God's justice on his mouth. The rulers of governments in this world ought to be following what is just as God has decided it. Not what they decide is just based on their own personal decisions, It's what God has said is just. This is why it is right for us to call our leaders to do what is right based on what God has said. Well, you can't, that's separation of church and state. You can't let your beliefs be... What are you talking about? If it's just, it's because God has decided it's just. If it's not because God decided it's just, then justice doesn't exist. It's a made-up figment of your imagination that is, and any government can create what is just and what is not just. And then who's to say that Hitler was unjust, Because he created it. He's the government, right? So if justice is a, on a personal basis, then there's no such thing as justice. If there is such thing as justice, then there must be a just lawgiver, a standard that we all must follow, and that is God's justice. And so that's why the king's sentence should be in accordance with God's justice. If a king or a government says it's okay to kill your baby, it is not okay to kill your baby. All right? I mean, that's not just, even if it's allowed by the government, and so on and so on. If the government says you cannot meet to worship, it is not just to not meet for worship, because the government doesn't get to make up its own justice. You see how that works? Okay, I'm trying to make sure we give some examples we all agree to. I think we all agree to those. Okay, Proverbs 29 verse 4 continues this. The king by judgment establisheth the land, but he that receiveth gifts overthroweth it. He's saying to his son, listen, if you will use right justice, the entire land is going to be solid and established and built up because it has a justice system. It is a just government. But if you start picking and choosing who gets justice and who doesn't based on the people you like, you're going to destroy the whole country. And I think people forget this. This really does destroy nations. Corruption in government isn't just wrong because, boy, that's not right. We're paying them to do this and that, and they don't do it. It's also wrong because it will absolutely destroy an entire nation over time. But yeah, it will destroy an entire nation. The justice of God is right, and people who don't see it as right are just not looking down the road long enough, right? It's like when we had I think the last time I said it was the 70s, and someone corrected me, it was the 60s, when the sexual revolution came about in our country. And people say, well, what does it matter? What does it matter? You don't get the right to tell people what to do. Well, fast forward 60 years, and look at how destroyed our country is. Look at the rampant sexual sins people are laughing this week about a CEO who was caught at some music concert with somebody that his HR representative that he was having an affair with. And these are terrible. These are just so we laugh about it because it's so common today. It's just, of course a CEO would be doing that. Wait a minute, how did we get there? Well, 60 years ago, we said, oh, well, who cares about a little sexual immorality? And then it ran its course, and it's destroying the nation. And now there's a good movement now, I think, in America to try to push against this. But these things do ruin and destroy nations. And I'm grateful that Solomon saw this, being the wisest man on the earth. He's like, listen, a king, by having justice, God's justice in his mouth, is actually going to help everybody in the nation, even the people who aren't in court, going to court for battling over certain things. He's still helping the whole nation by just doing justice to one person, and he'll destroy the whole nation by accepting bribes or by perverting justice. Yes.
So Sandy had used the example of Tulsi Gabbard, but it really was this, what you're saying brings to mind Pam Bondi for real, where she had posted on X, about the meddling in the 2016, right? And how something as simple as the presidential daily briefing was the one that was supposed to get published and ended up getting pulled, and they replaced it with a fake one, fake results having to do with Russia. But just what comes to my mind is it was just one of the historic things about her doing that. Never mind that it was on social media, so she's subverting the propaganda media. But she called out Obama on it. And typically, when you are the president, you are afforded this, these kind of gloved, I don't know how you say it, but you're just sort of left out of it because you're the president. But because we just went through I don't know, almost 10 years of prosecution of a different president. And it's sort of like they open the door now to their own
Reap what you sow.
side.
Yeah.
The same stuff getting held against them, only this time it's legit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the statement that they made, no one is above the law, is a good statement. I mean, that is true. But the problem is they thought they were. And it's true. Nobody, not even the king, should be above the law. And not the law of the land, the law of God. What is just, and it's just for the pauper, and it's just for the king, for the ruler. Yeah. Anyone else?
There's a little encouragement for persistence and perseverance in this. If you want to create a foundation, it takes time to build a foundation. So you have to keep doing judgment the right way. You have to build that foundation. In the same way, if you have a just system, it can probably handle a little bit of corruption if it does come in, but you have to go back to doing the right thing. But certainly the encouragement to persist in doing the right thing and persevering.
And that makes me think, too, about how applicable this is really in any area of leadership, right? Not just for a king or a governmental leader, but, as fathers over your children, mothers over your children, and different areas that you might lead in your workplace or things like that. What you're leading in will have ultimately good results if you will be just in it. And I think, there's some mercy between parents and children, sure, but there has to be a fairness, right? If one child says, "Wait, you always punish me worse than you punish the other one," because of, for doing the same thing, there's going to be something going on there. There's going to be a problem long term in the home, right? I know that my kids are all thinking about which one's the worst punished. But my job is to do the best that I can to do justice. And I think that probably applies in some sense, in every area of leadership. Yeah. Anyone else?
It occurs to me that Paul, with the Corinthians, that guy that was having an affair with his mother, or whatever.
Mother-in-law, yeah.
He had to deal with that because that's right in the church, and the leadership needed to come down on that guy, not to kill him, but to wake him up to what he was doing and what he was doing to the church and all the other people that he was affecting.
Yeah, that's a good example of church discipline, where a church has a member that is in ongoing, unrepentant sin in front of the world. And so now the world thinks of you as just being like everyone else. And you have to say, listen, no, just for the sake of image, if you don't repent of this thing, if you're not living in a life that's showing that is wrong, then you're going to have to separate from us. And then he repented, right? You remember that?
He did.
2 Corinthians. And so they said, come right back in. You're in. You're fine. But it needed to be an admission that was wrong, right?
It also, in the overall scheme of the country, it's the same idea. If somebody's having an affair or doing something wrong, they need to be dealt with and accounted. They have to give accounting, and a lot of times they aren't.
Yeah.
They get away with it, and nobody seems to care.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who, not a lot, but maybe several people that I've seen make statements like that adultery ought to be made illegal again, where it has actual legal consequences.
Yeah.
I think that's obviously true. I mean, just obviously true.
Well,
Adultery
it's in the
should have
Ten
consequences.
Commandments, for Pete's sakes, they
Yeah.
gotta wake up the
Yeah,
importance.
big time. I saw a hand over here. Yes.
I think for me, the most obvious version of all of this lies in like Congress and the Senate.
Yeah.
It's like the supposed leaders, the supposed two different teams you were speaking to earlier. But I don't think I've met a single person who would disagree with the fact that you say there's corruption and favoritism in Congress or in the Senate, right?
Yeah.
So yes, we're on opposing teams, but the just thing, we all seem to agree that there's a lack of justice going on, and there's a lot of favoritism and favors being done.
Yeah.
100%. On both sides.
Right.
Yeah. Though there's more on their side than ours. Let's see. Either one of you. Go ahead, Rhonda.
And I think one of the things that this hurts, because when you have something going on, someone needs to talk to someone about a situation, you used to be able to, you could say, yes, we are addressing that. But because things have been so corrupt, and the whole call of transparency, well, and as hypocritical as when there is as it is, unless the whole story is told, then people don't believe that it's being dealt with.
Yeah.
And so there's a failure there because there are certain things you don't need to know in any business.
Now, I'm picking up, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm picking up maybe an allusion to the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing there. No?
Actually, no, it's not. It's just,
But I'm gonna leap off of what you said to talk about it, because the reason that frustrates people and should frustrate people is because we want to know that justice is being done, right?
trust.
Right.
The government is
Yeah.
already, or the
Messed the
government,
whole thing up.
and not just the government, but just whomever
Yeah.
has already lost that respect because of the corruption.
Yeah.
That,
So they
yeah,
have
that
no
we have
credibility.
to require the whole story so that we
Yeah.
know that it's been dealt with.
And that's a good frustration for us to have. Because, I mean, yeah, we don't know what we don't know. That's why we're upset, right? Because we don't know this stuff. Yeah. But we should know it. But I think that shows us kind of like it's a good example of what we're talking about here, that the instinct for justice is built into our hearts, right? It's part of what God has engraven His law on the tablets of our hearts. Now, we like to look for justice for everyone else and not for us, right? That's our nature. But the instinct that we need to see some justice done, we need to know if there's other people involved in this stuff and make sure they're held accountable, is, I think, very good. And I think the people who are in the government who are ignoring the cries of people to say, we want to be sure that there's justice done, are ignoring that at their own peril, probably. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
So even if there's repentance, there still needs to be justice.
Sure.
Yes.
Sin has consequences. Sure.
Yeah.
So with King David, when the adultery with Bathsheba killing her husband, where was the justice there? He was still.
You always give me the hardest questions. That's a great question. That's a good question. Okay, so let me. So David's interesting because if you read Psalm 51, he talks about how there is no sacrifice for me to give. There's no way that I can make this right. Well, the solution in the law is you're stoned. But who's going to pick up a stone and throw it at David, right? I mean, is he going to command all of his men to stand around him and stone him? Would they even do it if he commanded them? So, yeah, right? So David is in a situation where he's not, and this is the way that I look at this. Maybe you disagree, but I would say that David's in a situation where he recognizes that he's not going to get what he justly deserves. But since he's not getting what is justice in this scenario, that's just the scenario he's in, he recognizes that scenario as God, as him owing even more to God the rest of his life, since his life really should be taken from him for his sin. He says, well, since you don't desire sacrifice, since there's nothing else that I can give you, I'll give you the sacrifices of my lips and of a broken heart and of the rest of my life, essentially. So I think that's a beautiful example of really every Christian who's come and found salvation in Christ. Though our sin deserves the eternal wrath of God, we're not going to receive it. So what do we do with the rest of our lives? Well, we just give it to Him in response to all that He's done. But as far as governmentally speaking, yes, David should have been put to death for his sin, but he wasn't going to be. Yeah.
It should have been like this magistrate solution,
Yeah.
right?
Right, there probably should have been an election. Now, David's case would have been difficult. The adultery was pretty obvious, I suppose. The murder would have been hard to maybe prove that it was murder because he has the right to order people into battle, and if people die, they die, and he just sort of did it in a way to make sure that he died. So it'd be hard to probably prove that. But the adultery you'd think would be pretty easy to prove. So yeah, there's a lot of witnesses to it, right? Somebody went and got the woman and brought her to him, and so there was.
God did take his child.
I was going to say,
Like-
God took his child.
There wasn't.
There was more than one penalty. As a matter of fact, throughout the rest of his life, he suffered penalties. And I would say that there's part of its consequences and part of its temporal penalties, right? Some of it's just natural results, like his son later on raping his daughter probably just came because he saw the example of his dad, and so there are some natural consequences that happened in his family because of it. His other son, Absalom, taking the throne from him may have been a direct result of what David did. I mean, like, look at how bad a ruler dad is. I'm going to be a better ruler. He takes the kingdom. So a lot of that might have been just natural consequences of what he did. Yeah. Should we do number 4? Or?
Yes.
We just have one more left. Okay, all right. We'll get out of here. Okay, here we go. This is the ultimate. Though the king is responsible to do justice, ultimately God is the one who does justice. So look at Proverbs 29 and verse 26. And I'll read to you one that goes along with this. Proverbs 16:33. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. The word disposing is translated from mishpat, justice or judgment. The whole judgment of what happens with the lot is of the Lord. He's sovereign over everything that happens. Now we see in Proverbs 29, verse 26, many seek the ruler's favor, but every man's judgment cometh from the Lord. Boy, that's a deep thought, isn't it? I mean, like, oh yeah, if I can get in good with the king, maybe I can get a good judgment in my favor. But really, even if the king perverts judgment because he likes you and doesn't do what is right, you're still going to get justice. You will have justice. You really need to get in good with God. You really need. That's right. Yeah, you need to be looking forward to the moment when you meet Yahweh. Anyone else on that one? Yes.
But that played out exactly what the previous question was. David and the justice thing. The rest of his life was a disaster.
Yeah.
And that was, I would argue, from God.
That's right.
Justice is of the authority. It's from the authority, and God is his authority, since he was king over everything.
Yeah.
There's temporary justice and then ultimate justice. And governments cannot give people ultimate justice. They can only do what is just here and now, right? But God will make sure everyone has ultimate justice, except those whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, of course. Yeah, and that's a whole other issue because Christ took that upon himself. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Very good. We're late, but it's your fault. So, all right, let's. That's right. Let's pray. Oh, Lord, we thank you for being with us today. We thank you that as we have met here today, we have sensed your presence. We have grown in our knowledge of you. We feel that your work has been done in our hearts and in the hearts of those who've been here with us, that we've fellowshiped, that we've praised you, that we've grown in our likeness to you. And may we go from here preserving those things that you've done in our hearts today, and allowing you to direct our steps with this great wisdom that you've shown us. And we pray these things in Jesus' name.